The world knew MarshallMathers as the white rapper who had made middle America clutch their pearls and teenagers clutch his CDs. But on February 21, 2000, outside the Staples Center in Los Angeles, 100 protesters held signs that read, "Hate speech is not art," while inside, in a locked bathroom backstage, the man they were screaming about was swallowing his third Vicodin of the evening. He stared at his reflection with hands that would not stop shaking. The biggest night of his career was 3 hours away. MarshallMathers was trying to remember how to breathe. What those protesters did not know, what the cameras would never catch, what even his closest collaborators barely understood, was that the person who would walk onto that Grammy stage was not the fearless provocateur from his lyrics. He was a 27-year-old father from Detroit who had spent the last 18 months watching his life explode in ways that made success feel like drowning. Tonight, surrounded by music's elite, with the world watching, he would have to prove that he belonged there while fighting a panic that threatened to tear him apart from the inside. If this story resonates with you, if you remember the cultural earthquake that was Eminem's rise, subscribe to stay connected to more untold stories from music's most defining moments. Asterisk. If you were alive in 1999, you remember where you were when you first heard the SlimShady LP. Asterisk. That album did not just enter the culture, it detonated inside it. For those watching from living rooms across America, it was shocking in ways that feel almost quaint now. But back then, when MTV still mattered and the Grammy Awards represented the music industry's ultimate validation, a white rapper from Detroit with unprecedented skill represented something that the establishment had not prepared for. Dr. Dre had staked his reputation on Marshall's talent. The MarshallMathers LP had sold 1.76 million copies in its first week, the fastest-selling hip-hop album in history. Songs like Kim and Criminal had turned him into a lightning rod. GLAAD called him homophobic. Conservative groups wanted him banned. And through it all, Marshall kept pushing boundaries. But what nobody in that stadium would see coming was the decision being made at that very moment. A collaboration so unexpected it would either validate Marshall completely or destroy him. The identity of his collaborator was being kept secret for a reason that would soon become terrifyingly clear. The year 1999 had been a blur of studio sessions and an escalating dependency on prescription pills that Marshall told himself was just stress management. When your father abandons you as an infant, when your mother sues you for $10 million over lyrics you wrote about her in songs heard by millions, when you were raising a daughter in a failing marriage while suddenly becoming the most controversial artist in America, stress becomes your constant companion that follows you everywhere. The Vicodin helped dull the edges of anxiety that cut into every moment. The Ambien helped him sleep through nights when anxiety would otherwise keep him awake until dawn. Staring at hotel room ceilings and cities whose names he could barely remember, the combination of substances worked even better than either alone, creating a chemical cushion between Marshall and the overwhelming reality of what his life had become in such a short time. His manager Paul Rosenberg had noticed the signs early on. In the first months after the SlimShady LP exploded, Marshall's pupils would constrict to pinpoints during afternoon meetings. His speech would slow. His movements would become careful and deliberate in ways that suggested pharmaceutical influence. His energy would spike and crash in patterns that had nothing to do with natural sleep schedules or even excessive caffeine intake. But in the music industry of 2000, where excess was expected and encouraged, and drug use was practically written into contracts as a job requirement, who was going to tell the biggest-selling artist in the world to slow down? Certainly not the label executives counting their money and watching sales numbers climb higher every week. Certainly not the producers booking studio time around Marshall's increasingly erratic schedule and mood swings. The pills were not addiction, Marshall told himself repeatedly in moments of uncomfortable clarity. They were fuel. They were performance enhancement. They were what got him through 18-hour studio sessions and hostile interviews with journalists who seemed determined to catch him saying something even more offensive than what was already in his lyrics. They were what kept him going through the constant gnawing anxiety that at any moment someone would expose him as a fraud. As a white kid from Detroit who had no business being in hip-hop in the first place, who had stolen from black culture and made millions doing it. But the Grammy Academy was about to expose something far more dangerous than any tabloid could manufacture, and Marshall had no idea what was coming his way. Asterisk. The Grammy nomination had arrived in January like a bomb disguised as a gift. Asterisk, asterisk, Best Rap Album, Best Rap Solo Performance, Best New Artist, and Album of the Year. The Grammy that said you were not just successful, you were art. But with the nominations came the firestorm. GLAAD announced protests. The National Organization for Women joined them. Behind closed doors, the Recording Academy debated rescinding Marshall's invitation. Marshall learned about these deliberations third hand, through whispers and careful phone calls. The Academy wanted him there for the ratings boost, but they needed insurance. They needed something to deflect criticism, to prove Eminem was not just a shock artist. They needed a solution so radical that when Marshall finally learned what they had arranged, it would either save his career or destroy it completely. But that revelation was still weeks away. Marshall had no idea about the machinery already turning behind the scenes. The name of the person they had contacted would have stopped his heart if he had known. February 21st arrived with Los Angeles sunshine that felt inappropriate for the wait ahead. Marshall woke at 6 in the morning because the Ambien had worn off and anxiety had kicked back in. He had spent the previous evening with Paul going over performance details, but something felt wrong. Paul had been evasive about certain staging elements, changing the subject whenever Marshall asked questions. There was something in Paul's eyes that suggested a secret being kept, something massive enough to make even his unflappable manager nervous. The protesters outside the Staples Center had started gathering at noon. By 3 in the afternoon, when Marshall's car pulled into the underground parking, there were over 100 of them. Their chants echoed through concrete like prophecies of doom. Marshall watched through tinted windows as security guards formed barriers. The Vicodin did almost nothing against rising panic. 3 hours until showtime. 3 hours until everything either came together or fell apart. But there was still one element nobody had told him about. One collaboration that would either redeem him or finish him. The identity of that collaborator was about to be revealed in the most shocking way possible. Asterisk, asterisk. The backstage area of the Staples Center during the Grammy Awards was controlled chaos painted in neutral tones and false smiles. Asterisk, asterisk. Artists, managers, publicists, and producers moved through hallways with careful choreography. Every interaction was calculated. Every greeting weighted with implications for future collaborations or past slights. Marshall, dressed in a baggy white t-shirt and loose jeans that hung off his thin frame, felt every eye on him. Christina Aguilera, who Marshall had brutally mocked in his lyrics, saw him from across the hallway and quickly turned away. Jennifer Lopez watched him pass with an expression Marshall could not read. He was simultaneously the most famous person in the building and the most isolated. In his dressing room, Marshall locked the door with shaking hands and stood in front of the mirror. His reflection showed a person who looked nothing like the confident provocateur from his music videos. His skin was pale, his eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. His hands were still shaking despite the 3 Vicodin he had taken since waking. The performance was in 2 hours. He still did not know why Paul kept checking his phone with that worried expression. But what Marshall was about to discover would either validate everything he had fought for or expose him as exactly what his critics claimed. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his daughter Haley's face. He saw the custody battle brewing with Kim. Paul returned to the dressing room with a look Marshall had never seen before. Something between excitement and terror. There was someone Paul needed Marshall to meet. Someone who would be joining the performance. Marshall felt his stomach drop. Joining the performance, this was supposed to be his moment. Who could possibly be important enough to add at the last minute? Paul's phone rang and he stepped into the hallway, leaving Marshall alone with spiraling thoughts. The pills had created fog in his mind, but beneath the fog was growing sense that the night was about to veer in a direction he could not control. Outside, 20,000 seats were filling with critics and fans who had come specifically to watch him fail. The protesters were still outside, their chants occasionally audible through concrete and steel. Marshall thought about walking out, about disappearing into the Los Angeles night. But then he thought about his daughter, about the kids in Detroit who saw themselves in his music, about Dr. Dre who had staked everything on Marshall's talent. He could not run. He could only move forward into whatever was waiting. But the identity of his mystery collaborator was still hidden, still a secret that would either save or destroy him. Asterisk, asterisk, an hour before showtime, Paul finally revealed what he had been hiding. Asterisk, asterisk, there would be a guest performer joining Marshall on stage. The Grammy Academy had arranged it, needed it, made it a condition of Marshall's performance. Before Marshall could explode in rage, Paul spoke a name. The name belonged to someone so unexpected, so impossible in the context of controversy surrounding Marshall's lyrics, that at first Marshall thought Paul was joking. This legend from a completely different world of music had agreed to stand next to Marshall on the Grammy stage. The implications were staggering. This collaboration would either validate Marshall in ways no Grammy trophy could, or expose him as exactly what his critics claimed. There was no middle ground. Marshall sat down heavily, his mind racing. Why would someone of that stature risk their reputation on him? Could Marshall actually pull this off? The pills were not helping anymore. The fog was not thick enough to hide behind. This was happening in 45 minutes. But understanding who his collaborator was and why they had agreed was something Marshall could not fully process. Not yet. Not until he saw them face to face. The production assistant returned with instructions for a quick run-through. Marshall would perform Stan, the dark ballad about an obsessed fan. The guest would handle the chorus vocals, the haunting refrain that in the album version was sung by Dido. But Dido was not coming. Someone else was coming. Someone whose voice Marshall had heard on the radio since he was a kid, whose albums had sold hundreds of millions of copies, whose presence on that stage would create a moment that would be discussed for decades. Marshall followed the assistant down the hallway toward the stage, his legs moving on autopilot. They reached the wings and Marshall saw the massive stage, the lighting rigs, the cameras positioned to capture every angle. And then he saw the piano positioned center stage. Standing next to it, adjusting the bench height and running through chord progressions, was the person Paul had named. Marshall stopped walking. The assistant gestured for him to continue, but Marshall could not move, because standing there, looking as comfortable on a Grammy stage as if born there, was someone Marshall never imagined would be in the same room with him, let alone performing with him, let alone risking everything to stand beside him. Asterisk, asterisk. The legend at the piano turned and saw Marshall standing frozen in the wings. Asterisk, asterisk. The British rock icon, a man who represented everything the protesters outside claimed to defend, smiled and walked toward Marshall with his hand extended. The moment felt surreal, but the handshake was firm and real. This person spoke about having listened to Marshall's work, about hearing pain beneath provocation, about believing in art's power to bridge divides. Marshall heard the words but could not process them. This was someone who had performed for royalty and presidents, and this person was here, willing to stand next to Marshall on the Grammy stage in front of 100 million viewers worldwide. The rehearsal was brief, just enough to confirm timing. The piano opened with chords that had defined generations. The voice that filled the empty arena had been soundtrack to millions of lives. Marshall joined in for his verses. But something happened as they ran through the song. Their voices, so different in every possible way, found strange harmony. It was collision of two worlds that should never have intersected. When rehearsal ended, this legend placed a hand on Marshall's shoulder. Words were spoken that would stay with Marshall forever. Marshall nodded, unable to trust his voice. 30 minutes until showtime. 30 minutes until the world would see what seemed impossible just hours before. Marshall returned to his dressing room. The revelation of his collaborator's identity had shifted something fundamental in how he understood the night ahead. This was not just about proving he could rap at the Grammys. This was about showing that art could be more complicated than binary judgments, that people were capable of growth and finding common ground. He splashed cold water on his face and made a decision. Whatever happened in the next hour, he would give everything. No armor, no SlimShady persona to hide behind. Just MarshallMathers, standing next to this legend whose identity would soon be broadcast to the world. Asterisk, asterisk, etc. With 15 minutes until showtime, Marshall stood in the wings watching the arena fill. Asterisk, asterisk, 20,000 people in every seat. He could see people who had called him a disgrace on television, politicians who had used his lyrics as evidence of cultural decline, and fans who had memorized every word. The house lights dimmed, crowd noise swelled into a roar. Marshall felt his heart pounding. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, and then Marshall was walking onto the Grammy stage. Lights blinding, 20,000 people watching, 100 million more from home. Protesters outside, and at the piano, sitting with an expression that communicated both confidence and compassion, was the collaborator whose identity was about to be revealed to a shocked world. This was it. Everything he had survived, everything he had fought for, All of it had led to this stage, this song, this impossible collaboration. The first verse of Stan came from deep in Marshall's chest. Every word weighted with 18 months of chaos. The arena was silent except for his voice and the piano mastery. Marshall could feel the Vicodin creating dangerous distance, but muscle memory took over. He had performed this song dozens of times, but never like this. Never on the Grammy stage with massive lighting rigs capturing every expression. Never with protesters outside. Never with 100 million people watching. Never with everything hanging in the balance. Each line about obsessed fan stan, about desperate letters and growing rage, felt more real than ever. Marshall was not just performing, he was living it. And sitting at that piano, about to join him, was someone whose voice would transform this performance from controversy into cultural moment. Asterisk, asterisk. The voice joined Marshall's for the chorus, and something magical happened that nobody in that arena could have anticipated. Asterisk, asterisk. The legendary vocals, refined by decades of performance across every major stage in the world, from Royal Albert Hall to Madison Square Garden to stadiums across continents, blended with Marshall's raw Detroit delivery in ways that defied every rule of music theory and every boundary of genre. It was marriage of two different worlds that had never before intersected in any meaningful way. Two different generations separated by 25 years of cultural evolution and social change. Two vastly different life experiences that somehow found common ground in pain and artistic expression and the universal human need to be understood. The legend at the piano had survived excess that killed contemporaries and friends, had faced discrimination and hatred that would have broken lesser artists, had made the long, painful journey to self-acceptance that required confronting demons and making peace with a past that could not be changed. Marshall was just beginning that same journey, standing at the entrance to a tunnel he could not yet see the end of, unaware of how dark it would become before any light appeared. In the audience, people who had come ready to judge with opinions already formed during the controversial weeks leading up to this night, who had prepared critiques and condemnations during the drive to the Staples Center, found themselves listening with genuine curiosity and openness instead of anger. The performance was not what they had expected at all. There was no shock value designed to generate headlines and controversy, no profanity meant to provoke conservative groups and parents' organizations, no provocative staging calculated to create talking points on cable news. Just two artists, one at the absolute height of his powers and commercial success, and one decades into legendary status, with nothing left to prove to anyone, finding common ground in a song about dangerous intimacy between musicians and fans, about responsibility and burden that comes with having your voice amplified to millions of people, who hang on every word and build their identities around your art. Each verse built on the previous one. Stan writes increasingly desperate letters. He feels ignored and betrayed, performed with gravitas only a legend could provide. With piano creating haunting atmosphere, it became meditation on responsibility, on power artists have over audiences, on parasocial relationships that feel real but are fundamentally illusions. When Marshall reached the final verse, responding to Stan's letters only to realize he is writing to a dead man, his voice cracked with genuine emotion. The pills had lowered inhibitions. What came through was raw and real. This was not SlimShady. This was MarshallMathers, a 27-year-old father who understood obsession and isolation and terror of losing control. The final piano notes faded and the arena was completely silent. Then the eruption came. It was not polite applause. It was the ovation that happens when 20,000 people realize they have been part of something significant. People were standing, not just young fans, but industry veterans, older artists, even some who had publicly condemned him. The legend at the piano stood and embraced Marshall, and in that hug, broadcast to 100 million viewers, something fundamental shifted. Here was this icon, this person who had survived battles that would have destroyed others, literally embracing the rapper that God had called homophobic. It was a statement more powerful than any press release. It said people are more complicated than their worst moments, that grace and growth are possible. Asterisk, asterisk. Backstage after the performance, Marshall locked himself in the bathroom again, but this time it was not panic. Asterisk, asterisk. It was overwhelming rush of adrenaline and relief and emotions he did not have names for. He had done it. He had stood on the biggest stage in music and proved something. Paul found him sitting on the bathroom floor. The pride on Paul's face was evident. The performance had changed everything. Marshall nodded, unable to trust his voice. The implications were too massive to process. The rest of the ceremony unfolded in surreal blur. Marshall won Best Rap Album. The statue felt heavier than expected. He won Best Rap Solo Performance. He lost Album of the Year to Santana, but that loss felt less significant than the win already achieved on stage. Other artists approached throughout the night. Their congratulations felt genuine. Christina Aguilera acknowledged him with professional smile. But the most significant moment came when Dr. Dre found Marshall in a hallway. Dre never said much, but the gesture he made communicated approval that carried weight of Father's blessing. That brief interaction meant more than any Grammy trophy. It would replay in Marshall's mind for years. During dark times still coming, ***, the after-parties were legendary events, where careers are made and everyone pretends to have more fun than they are having. ***, Marshall attended 3, moving through crowds who all wanted to talk now that he had been validated. People who had refused to work with him were suddenly interested. The transformation was dizzying and hollow. Marshall could feel pills wearing off and crash beginning. But something else was happening underneath pharmaceutical fog. He kept thinking about his collaborator, about the grace shown, about the risk taken. That gesture meant something. It required commitment to being better than his worst lyrics, to growing beyond shock value. Marshall was not sure he was ready for that growth, but watching famous people do cocaine off glass tables while DJ played music nobody listened to, Marshall felt weight of possibility. This night could be beginning of something transformative, or peak before a long fall. The choice was his to make. Around 2 in the morning, Marshall found himself on a balcony overlooking Los Angeles. City lights spread beneath like circuit board of dreams. Paul found him there. A question was asked that got to the heart of everything. Marshall considered lying, but the night had been too real. The truth came out. The triumph felt hollow. Winning had not fixed what was broken inside. Paul was quiet before responding. External validation could not fix internal problems. The Grammy did not change who Marshall was at core. It just gave him bigger platform. The pills in Marshall's pocket felt heavy with implication. He knew Paul was right. He knew chemical assistance was becoming the pressure. He knew change was necessary. But knowing and doing are different countries, separated by ocean of fear. On February 21, 2000, standing on that balcony, MarshallMathers was not ready to cross that ocean. He was ready to keep pushing, keep performing, keep using whatever help needed to survive. The consequences would take years to manifest, would lead to places darker than that locked bathroom. But those consequences were still invisible in Los Angeles night. The sun came up over Los Angeles with that particular California clarity that makes everything look possible. Marshall watched from the balcony, still awake. The protesters had gone home, cameras packed away, Grammy stage being dismantled. But what had happened on that stage would persist, would ripple through culture, would change how people thought about MarshallMathers and Eminem and distance between artist and art. Years later, after overdoses that should have killed him and rehabilitation that rebuilt him, and slow reconstruction of life nearly destroyed by success, Marshall would look back with complicated feelings, pride in the performance, in the statement made with his legendary collaborator, whose name would forever be linked with his redemption, regret that he had not recognized warning signs, that he had let validation distract from deeper work needed, but also gratitude for moment of grace offered, for door that performance opened, for proof that redemption was possible if you faced yourself honestly. On that balcony as sun rose, Marshall did not know any of that yet. He only knew he had survived the night. He had proved something, and tomorrow would bring new challenges, new mountains to climb. The pills in his pocket promised to make those mountains easier. It would take years and near death before Marshall understood the terrible truth. The pills were not climbing equipment. They were the mountain itself.